So good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to Get to Grips with Understanding Attendance Allowance. Great to be here with the Royal Voluntary Service again. My name, if you haven't joined before, is Adam Matthews. I'm the Social Delivery Manager at Society Matters. It's great to be working with the Royal Voluntary Service, and there will be plenty of time today for any questions that you may have. If you haven't attended these sessions before, we have done several courses prior on all the welfare benefits. Today, we're going to be focusing on attendance allowance. So the benefit for people with disabilities, long-term health conditions, for people over state pensionable age. And thanks again for joining us. So let's have a look at what we will be covering today. So we will have a look at the application process for attendance allowance. We're going to have a look at where you can get support with the attendance allowance process. So where can you get help with filling in the forms? How long does it take? What supporting medical evidence do you need to put alongside your claim? We'll have a look at the daytime and nighttime test, which is really important for attendance allowance. So if you have or you're supporting a person that has needs extra supervision, both daytime and nighttime, then we should be going for the highest rate. And we'll have a look at that a little bit later this morning. If it's either daytime or nighttime and there's no crossover, then we'd be looking at the lower rate. So unlike the other benefits which we've been looking at, so DLA for children and personal independence payment, there is no mobility component, quite controversially, for attendance allowance itself. But we'll have a look at some tips of where mobility may factor into it. We'll have a look at supporting evidence which could be used for a claim. As with all the welfare benefits, it's really, really important to back up your claim with relevant supporting medical evidence, whether that's prescriptions, it could be potentially a statement from a carer, it could be a diary of what somebody's needs is over a couple of weeks. We'll have a look at some of the different types of support that we could get. We'll have a look, really importantly, at other benefits you can get once you're entitled to attendance allowance as well. So it's definitely worth getting a full benefit check once that person has become entitled to attendance allowance, because it can support people that are caring for that person financially, potentially. So we can have a look at carers allowance, the carers element of universal credit. There could be potentially higher payments of other benefits as well. And of course, we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end as well. Okay. So just a little bit about ourselves at Society Matters. We are the trading subsidiary of Citizens Advice Gateshead. We're very lucky where we are. We have obviously benefit specialists, housing specialists. So all the training that we do, all the profit that we make does go back into the charity. We are a KIC, community interest company, and that really does help at the moment with the cost of living. So really proud to be working with Royal Voluntary Service. Some of the other people that we've been working with, I think around 380 organisations across the UK now. Okay. So just with housekeeping today, so if you do have any questions, please do pop them in the chat. We will monitor the chat to make sure your questions are answered at the end. I will be giving a good 5 minutes for questions, but if you do have questions, you can leave them on the feed as well, and we will address them later on if you're watching this as a recording later. With today, it's going to last probably around 25 minutes from now, with that 5 minutes for Q&A at the end there. Okay. There will be a PDF of all the links that I will mention today as well. Some really useful information in there, who's eligible, what sort of evidence to use. So that's there for you to have a read through after the session if you are supporting one or you need that support yourself. Okay. So a few facts about attendance allowance. So attendance allowance is one of the most underclaimed benefits. There's a few reasons for that in my experience. People over state pension age are least likely to reach out for support or a full benefit check. There's a lot of stigma around claiming welfare benefits for some older people as well, potentially, which of course I've experienced myself with my own Nan, bless her. She was quite clearly entitled to attendance allowance, but was saying to me that there was other people who would probably need it more than her. So I had that discussion around you've been paying into the system all of your life. Sometimes some people might need a bit of support and encouragement. A lot of people over state pension age do struggle with the quite lengthy forms and parts of the process where they may need to get information online as well. So there can be a bit of a digital barrier. That's something that we would help with at your local citizens advice, potentially, if someone was struggling to make that claim themselves or getting the evidence themselves. Also, as well, when it comes to attendance allowance, there's a lot of misconceptions. So people tend to think it's a means tested benefit, or if they're own their own home, they're not going to be entitled. So it's absolutely a non-means tested benefit. It doesn't matter if you've got £0 or £1 million in the bank, whether you own your own home or you're renting out other homes. It's more about just being eligible for the benefit, and we'll look at that eligibility criteria very shortly. So it doesn't matter about your savings. It's not like universal credit where there's a £16,000 savings and capital cut-off point. Okay. You don't actually need a carer to receive attendance allowance. A lot of people, especially older couples, tend to look after each other in some cases, but there will be people that don't have access to a carer. That doesn't mean that you're not going to be entitled to attendance allowance itself. Most people won't have to attend a medical assessment, so it's not like personal independence payment for people of working age, where most people will be expected to attend an assessment centre or a phone call. That doesn't happen as much as on attendance allowance, so it's quite rare. It's only when the DWP or Department for Work and Pensions might need to ask a few questions to clarify what support that person needs, or they might have a few questions themselves. Claiming isn't going to affect any other benefits that you receive, so it's not going to take anything away. With attendance allowance, it's much more likely to add things on to other benefits, so you're never going to miss out on other payments. It's non-means tested, it's tax-free, etc. It doesn't matter about your savings and capital, as we've mentioned. It potentially is going to rise people's other parts of people's benefits, especially if they're caring for that person on attendance allowance. So it is a qualifying benefit, whether you get the lower or the higher rate, potentially for carers allowance, if that person's caring for the person more than 35 hours per week, which a lot of people will be. So people looking after their neighbours, grandparents, parents, etc. It could be potentially that's going to rise the rate to them, and we'll look at that shortly. Okay, so that kind of a bit of myth busting when it does come to attendance allowance itself. So let's have a look at the eligibility, and this will be in the links that we do send out. So there is a more lengthy list in there for you to read through. So you do need to be over state pension age to claim attendance allowance. If people aren't 100% sure on the state pension age, you can find out online, and that's something that we'd be able to help with at your local citizens advice as well. So you can find out what your state pension date is, and what likely that the payments are going to be as well. Also, what your national insurance contributions are. So definitely worth having a look at, and that is in the links that we will be sending out. You should apply for attendance allowance if you have a disability or an illness and need help or supervision throughout the day or at times during the night, even if you don't currently get that help. So lots of people do struggle to get by. I was speaking to someone recently at the initial exploration for a welfare benefits query, and she was mentioning that she was managing to get by, but when we jumped a little bit deeper, she was having to wait for people to come by to help her out with washing and bathing, shopping, etc., and was really struggling to get up and down the stairs as well. So we managed to get that extra support from the local authority. So sometimes, you know, you might have to have quite a difficult conversation to say, are you sure you are managing to get by? Can you explain a little bit more? It could be that you need help or struggle with your personal care. For example, getting dressed, eating or drinking, getting in and out of the bed, bathing or showering, or going to the toilet as well. So all things that could be quite difficult to talk about with somebody that's supporting you with that claim if you've just met them. So it's really important when you're answering the questions of the attendance allowance form, all these things would need to be addressed. It could be that you need supervision or help to keep yourself safe. So an example of this would be perhaps somebody that has been diagnosed with dementia. Potentially somebody comes around the house to do all the cooking for them because they've left the pans on in the past. That would be something we'd definitely get on the form as supporting evidence. So what would happen if that person wasn't there to support them? What does that person do to minimize the risk to themselves is really, really important if they're able to. So supervision, if that is the case, it would really be good to get a statement from the person that gives that supervision just on how often. And if it's daytime and nighttime, to make that very clear, because if it is both daytime and nighttime, we should be going for the higher rate itself. Okay. So when it comes to the eligibility, you can claim attendance allowance if you need help with personal care, supervision, or watching over because of a physical or a mental disability or long-term health condition. It could be a combination of conditions as well. So it could be that person has a diagnosis of 2 or 3 different things. If that is the case, it's really, really important that we address every condition separately when we're making the application, noting if it's both daytime and nighttime. Do you require support every day? Is it what would happen if that support wasn't there? For example, if you didn't take your medication, is there a risk to life? Does somebody need to administer that medication? Does someone need to remind you? It doesn't actually matter if you live alone, with other people, or have a carer. It doesn't matter whether you currently get any help. So what really does matter is you reasonably require help. So just making that very clear. So if somebody is struggling to get by, really need to get a list of what them struggles are. So that Department for Work and Pensions decision maker really gets a feel for how that person is struggling. So it's very different to personal independence payment, which we discussed last time. Personal independence payment, of course, is points based. With attendance allowance, you have to satisfy the daytime and nighttime test itself. So if that person just needs the support either daytime or nighttime, so it could be that person needs supervision during the day, but they sleep quite safely by themselves, and that supervision continues the next day. If it's both supervision daytime and nighttime, or that person needs support getting to and from the toilet, it could be that they need support washing and bathing, but then they also need to be woken up to administer medication, then that means we should be going for the higher rate, because it's them needs are both daytime and nighttime. If it's either daytime or nighttime, then it's the lower rate, which we'll look at in just a moment. So the daytime and nighttime test itself. So what the rules say with attendance allowance is that you must reasonably require either frequent attention throughout the day in connection with your bodily fluids, or continual supervision to avoid substantial danger to yourself or others. So there's a risk to yourself potentially or others without that support or supervision, or you struggle to manage that yourself at the moment. With the nighttime, you must show you require either prolonged or repeated attention, or require another person to be awake for a prolonged period or at frequent intervals to watch over you to avoid a risk to yourself or to others as well. So if somebody potentially would get up and wander off during the nighttime, they might leave the cooker on or the oven, or they've done that in the past. Potentially there's a risk both daytime and nighttime in them circumstances. So if somebody's waking up to check on the person 6 or 7 times a night, and also that supervision is lasting all the way through the daytime, then it's definitely the higher rate would be going for in them circumstances. So there's 2 different rates. For the lower rate, £73.90 a week, if you fulfill either the day or night conditions. So remember, there's no crossover. It's one or the other. For the higher rate, which jumps up to £110.40 a week, that means that you full both daytime and nighttime conditions there as well. So that's the terminology that the DWP use, and that's what they'll be looking out for when you make an application there as well. And in the information that we do send out, it really does give a good breakdown of how this works, question by question, as you are working through. Okay. So just to give you an example, a case study. So you can see here that David is 79. With David, excuse me. So David is 79. During the day, a relative stays with him at all times, helps keeps him safe as he's forgetful, sometimes wanders off or turns the gas on without lighting it. So these are real life case studies. So David's got up and left the home during the night in the past, and he needs to be checked on several times by his relative who stays over every night. So we've got the relative staying over every night to supervise. There's a risk factor there. It's both daytime and nighttime that he needs support. So with this, we'd be looking at going for the higher rate with David, absolutely. Okay, so just a case study there. So in terms of the application process, how do we apply? So the best way, the way that we recommend would be to contact the Attendance Allowance helpline, which is on there. This will also be in the information that we do send out on the PDF. You can ask for that claim form to be sent out to you. That claim form is then date stamped, and as long as you return the envelope provided within 6 weeks, your reward actually starts from the day you made that phone call. So that's the quickest way, and getting the money backdated. That's the best recommended way of doing things. You can download the form on the government website, but it will be dated from the day the Department for Work and Pensions received the form through the post itself. So with the first way of doing things, ringing the helpline, the form usually comes out within 2 weeks. If you need more time to fill in that form, perhaps you're waiting for supporting medical evidence, or potentially that person that you're supporting only has a week left and they've had that form sitting there, you can ring up the Department for Work and Pensions and ask for an extension. It's okay to fill in the form for someone if they can't sign it themselves. If they can't sign the form, you'll need the legal right to do so for them. That would be, you could potentially make yourself an appointee. It could be that you have the power of attorney that lets you manage their benefits, or it could be that you're a deputy as well. So you'd need to let the Department for Work and Pensions know that that would be the case. And you can do that again by contacting the AA helpline, which is on your screen there. Okay. There is a process for people that are terminally ill or have a life expectancy than less than 12 months. Unfortunately, in my experience with attendance allowance, this does happen more often for people over state pension age that are wanting to claim attendance allowance. They are the age group that are most susceptible to terminal illness, unfortunately. That's going to be a really stressful time for families, and they're probably going to have more costs, which attendance allowance could help with. So it could be trips to the hospitals, hospices, etc. We could support that through the attendance allowance application. A normal attendance allowance application on average at the moment, I think, is taking around 4 months. However, if you ask for the special rules, which means you can ask any doctor, medical professional, specialist, or consultant that's supporting that person for what's called an SR1 form, that means that you should get a decision within 2 weeks. So you just need to make that very clear when you're making the application over the helpline for attendance allowance. And that means that you should get a payment within 2 weeks. And also you should automatically get the higher rate, which is £110.40 per week. So obviously that's going to be a very stressful time for families. In the information that we will be sending out to you, it does have what to do if somebody is terminally ill there as well. Okay. So where can you get support? Local Citizens Advice will be able to help with an attendance allowance application. Age UK are really good as well, as are Independent Age. For carers, Carers UK are really good as well. Please check the information sheet for more details on support that's available that we will be popping out to you there. In terms of what could you use as supporting evidence, so we always say it's a good idea to back up any welfare benefit application with as much evidence as you can. This just makes things a lot clearer for a Department for Work and Pensions decision maker. A diary would be a really good idea for 2 weeks, and it could be the person that's supporting the person that's going for the attendance allowance claim, just showing if that support is both daytime and nighttime. So if you keep a diary for 2 weeks, it really does show a decision maker how often that support or the struggles are. A signed and dated statement from a relative or a carer can prove useful as well. So we're not talking about paid carers here, or there could be a paid carer. Family members, friends that are helping out, that would be really useful. A list of any aids and appliances or adaptations recommended or applied for that person as well. So if that person has a hearing aid or needs the use of a wheelchair or walking stick, what would happen if that help wasn't there? Does that person need help setting up that aid or appliance as well? That's really important to note as well. Really important to include a copy of any prescriptions, treatments and plans. Anything over the last 12 months is definitely going to be relevant to the condition or conditions. Again, there's some really good information on what to use in the information that we will be sending out there. Okay. So what happens if things go wrong with an application? So if somebody would like to challenge a decision, meaning they didn't get the rate that they think they're entitled to, so perhaps they got the lower rate when they feel that they do have daytime and nighttime needs, or perhaps they haven't been given a decision at all, it hasn't worked out, you can actually challenge that decision. So you can challenge it if you've been told you can't get the benefit, you're getting a lower rate than you expected. The first step would be to ask the Department for Work and Pensions to review that decision. That's called the mandatory reconsideration, which means another Department for Work and Pensions decision maker would look at that claim and case. If they don't change their decision after that, you could ask for an appeal to tribunal, which is an independent panel. So it's not the DWP, it's an independent tribunal which will be looking at that decision, and they tend to be more favourable in them circumstances. It's quite rare. It's not so much like personal independence payment, where people really do quite often get unfavourable decisions, attendance allowance, but there still may be situations where you need to challenge that decision. And again, that's something we have a lot of experience of at your local citizens advice of being able to support. It might just be that we need to get some extra evidence, and we'd have a look at what extra evidence we could use in them circumstances. Again, in the information that we will be sending out, it does lay out how to challenge a decision, but I do recommend getting support if that's something that you need. So other benefits and what could attendance allowance entitle you and people that support you with. So it doesn't matter whether you get the lower or the higher rate. If somebody's caring for that person more than 35 hours per week, which a lot of people will be, that may well entitle them to carers allowance, as long as they're earning less than around £170 per week. If they are working, and they're claiming universal credit, or they're thinking about claiming universal credit, we could have a look at the carers element of universal credit, where you don't have them earnings ruling. So it doesn't actually matter how much that you are earning to get the carers element, unless you are over the threshold for claiming universal credit itself in general. So really important for carers. They're one of the groups that are really struggling with the cost of living, just to make sure that they are getting everything they are entitled. So it doesn't matter whether you're a spouse or a neighbour. If you're caring for that person 35 hours per week and they're on the qualifying disability benefit, then it should be you that is entitled to either the carers allowance or potentially the carers element of universal credit. Could potentially lead to a reduction or a potential not having to pay council tax. So if somebody is classed as being severely mentally impaired, and that's not a nice term to use, but it's a term the local authorities do use themselves. If somebody had quite advanced dementia, for example, they should be exempt from council tax, and you could use attendance allowance as evidence of that. It could also lead to higher rates of pension credit. So there is a potential carers addition and a disability addition as well. It could lead to housing benefit support as well. So getting paid more housing benefit to offset your rent in some cases if you are over state pension age. It could also lead to things such as a disabled person's rail card or a blue badge as well. So it's definitely worth getting a full benefit check once that person's entitled to attendance allowance, not just for them, but for their support structure as well, their carers, etc. We don't want people struggling, especially at the moment with the cost of living. So that brings us to the end of today's presentation. I hope people did find that useful. Just to see if anybody has any questions at all. And just a reminder, if you're watching this recorder back, you can leave your questions and we will answer them as they come through. So thank you very much for everyone that joined us today or is joining later. And we look forward to seeing you on the next session. It's been a pleasure to have you all. And thank you. Oh, thank you, Jack.